Okay, let me see if this thing is actually recording. It's flashing like it says it is. Okay, Kathy, you wanted me to talk a little bit about my famous family. I have a lot of them. Believe me, going back just 100 years to the 1800s. My great-great-grandfather was one of the first state representatives of Texas. Smith County, in fact. His name was Jonathan Luter. And my maiden name was Luter, and I didn't know that much about the family genealogy until recent years. I knew a little bit because of a cousin who's also a descendant of Jonathan Luter, who got me interested in genealogy. Her name was Mary Frances Porter, and she was a descendant of one of Jonathan Luter's sons, as was I, but a different son. And she sent me pictures of herself and of Jonathan Luter, and that just got me off and going. I wanted to know more. And I did our family genealogy all the way back on my father's side, because that was where I had all the information. And then I had to give up because it dead-ended, because there just wasn't any records more available much past Texas. Well, my father's family, we got all the way back to Virginia. I'm sorry about that. It was one of his grandmothers that dead-ended. And we are some of the first people ever to settle in Virginia. We had ancestors in, not precisely the Jamestown settlement, although I think there were some there, but very, very early Virginia. And my mother was a different problem. She couldn't remember her grandparents, so that took me a little while longer to find out much about her. She tried to tell me, and there was one aunt of hers that at least knew one set of her grandparents' names, but it was very hard and expensive to do genealogy before the internet and sites like Ancestry. I was just plugging along, trying to see how far I could trace my family back. And I made a breakthrough about 8 or 9 years ago on my grandmother, my mother's mother, and where she'd married and who her father had been. And that allowed me to start really going to the wall with tracing my family. Like I said, once I made that breakthrough into the Indiana ancestors, it took off. And I traced it back and back and back, and I would do things you weren't supposed to do in genealogy. I would also pick an ancestor that I knew was one, but I didn't know who I was descended to him from, and I would trace him forward and then connect the dots between descendants. And that worked for some, and a lot of it was just constantly slugging, constantly writing to genealogy societies and librarians and county registrars and that sort of thing. And then I ran across, I don't know, I guess it was about 6 or 7 years ago, I ran across somebody named Putnam in the family tree, and I duly noted it and wrote him up on this large tree that I had up in a poster board in a hallway in my home. And everybody was up there penciled in, and I forgot about them. And then one day I was researching them again, trying to go further back, and found some reference to them and the Salem witch trials. And I thought, uh-oh. And I looked more deeply into this ancestor who was Captain Jonathan Putnam. And I descended from him through his daughter, Priscilla. I think it was Priscilla. She married Joseph Bailey. And I was looking through those, and then I started discovering that they were involved in the Salem witchcraft trials. And I thought, oh my God, it was those Putnams. And that just knocked me for a loop, and I couldn't find out enough about them. I got every book I could find on the Salem witch trials and read up on it and read online on it and started to really research them more deeply, because I'd been fascinated by the Salem witchcraft trials when I was a child. At Halloween, you'd get interested in witches and all that sort of thing, and our library in the school where I went to elementary school had some books on it, and I read up on it, and I thought, oh, they were terrible people for what they did to all those poor women and men who were accused of witchcraft. Then, here I go, like decades later, finding out, oh my God, I'm descended from one of those terrible people, because it was Captain Jonathan Putnam, who was constable of Salem at the time of the witch trials, and he and his brother Thomas and some of the other Putnam clan were very involved in bringing forth a lot of the people who were being accused. He would actually go to arrest them and bring them and put them into the prison or wherever they kept them, waiting for trial. And it was his, I think, niece or second cousin, Ann Putnam Jr., who was one of the lead girls, what they called the afflicted girls, who were the ones who were like having the seizures and claiming they were being attacked by witches and all that sort of thing. And well, I was just stunned, and it does affect my life, because finding out that you had ancestors involved in the witch trials in any direction would be fascinating, but to find mine were among the ones who were the accusers, and they were not among the actual accused witches, was just, to me, like a great joke of the universe on me, because through my family, I've been involved in studying paranormal things my entire life, studying the occult, just researching it because it was a family affair. Both my grandmothers were involved in many ways in occult things, and when I wrote you an email earlier tonight and told you about my father's mother, who held seances, and as far as I know, she's not really descended from anyone involved in the witch trials, except, I don't know, she could be. I haven't traced her back past the mid-1800s because her line dead-ended, at least for now, or what we call a brick wall in genealogy. I have quite a few brick walls I haven't broken down yet. And like I said, she held seances. She was a dowser. She called it, in her day, doodle bugging. She used to doodle bug, as she would call it, on the battlegrounds of the San Jacinto battlegrounds in Texas, from the San Jacinto Monument, where one of the great battles for Texas independence was fought against the armies of Mexico. And she found all kinds of artifacts there using her dowsing skills, which were donated to the museum. My other grandmother could tell the future with a deck of playing cards. In fact, both of them had some ability to tell the future. So they were doing things in modern times that in ancient Salem, in 1600 Salem, would have been definitely regarded as witchcraft and that sort of thing. And I've done a lot of things that would be regarded as that. Just studying the paranormal would make me suspect to those like Cotton Mather and all the other accusers. And definitely my ancestor, Captain John Putnam, would have probably got a rope out and hung me, even though I'm his great-great-great-granddaughter. I think 11 generations back, I'm his 11th great-granddaughter. And so it just blew me away to know that I had ancestors who were opposed to the very things that I have studied in my entire life and have given my life a lot of interesting aspects. It was fascinating. And I think, as I told you in some of our first email exchanges, I feel that the Salem witch trials were not predicated upon the things that most researchers think. I believe that real paranormal phenomena was going on during the trials, and I think that everyone thinks the afflicted were making it all up so they could steal land and get revenge on people they hated, or just get attention. I think it was more than that, because it was going on in Andover, as well as several other places where the different afflicted people were not necessarily in communication with one another. It wasn't like they had TV and radio and daily newspapers. So there was, I think, more going on there than revenge, attention-seeking, and land-grabbing. And I think, in looking through the records, I found evidence that, as I said, real paranormal phenomena was going on, and because people in those days had no clue about things like remote viewing and auras and seeing the future and just what we call psychic sciences today, they had to couch it in terms that were part of their time, such as satanic or Satanism and witchcraft. And that's how they had to operate. They had no other recourse within the paradigm of the times in which they lived. So I think that probably more was going on there, because I only found out just a few years ago about what was in the journals of Governor John Winthrop, who was the first governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, which was peopled largely by my ancestors. The bulk of them came over with the Winthrop fleet. I think a few came over to America sooner, but the bulk of my mother's side of the family came with the Winthrop fleet, and that was about 1635. And in his journal in 1639, John Winthrop wrote about these two men, that they were considered sober, respectable Christian men who saw this thing that today we would chalk up as being a UFO. And it appeared again later, and he wrote about it two times in his journal. There were other things written about at that time that, if you look at them through the eyes of a modern occultist, which I consider myself to be, I believe something was going on, and I don't think that the people who were accused of witchcraft were more than the victims that other historians believe them to be. I think all the people there at the time were victims of something, their own ignorance of real supernatural phenomena, or real supernatural phenomena that had it in for them. I do not know, though jury's still out on those things, that, especially as they pertain to my family, because they're still going on to this day. My brother and I both had paranormal things happen to us as children. My mother did, my father. It has definitely been a family affair. So, like I said, to find out, knowing what I knew about my family as it was, to find out that I had ancestors that were involved in the Salem witch trials, I laughed every time I thought about it for months. And I did not because I thought that the horror of the trials was funny. I laughed at the fact that it seemed like such great irony. It just, to me, it was the most ironic thing to find people who were involved in this great thing in history that is so infamous that almost everybody in the world with knowledge, with access to education regarding history, knows about the witch trials of Salem, and everyone talks about it, and there's societies, and there's book after book that is being written about it to this day, people analyzing it. Was it caused by ergot poisoning in their grain crops that year because of rain? And what was it? What caused the trials? And I don't know. To me, it was just the height of irony, and I'm actually delighted that they were my ancestors, because I find them fascinating people. And that's all I can think of to say for now, unless you want to later find out about some of my other interesting ancestors who were involved in the Civil War and in the American Revolution and other crazy things. I even had one ancestor, a guy named Doubleday, who grabbed Guy Fawkes, I believe. Who was some guy that they named Guy Fawkes Day after England. He tried to blow up Parliament or something way back when, and my ancestor was one of the guys who grabbed him and stopped him. Yeah, I have a whole lot of them. I had one ancestor who was in the wreck of a ship named the Angel Gabriel, and his story was rather sad because it frightened him so bad that he refused to ever go back to England and get his wife and children. And his wife was too frightened by his letters about the wreck to be willing to come, so once he came to America, he and his wife never saw each other again. That was kind of sad. I mean, this is one of the things that makes genealogy so fascinating, because people were not just names and the dates of birth and dates of death. A lot happened to them between when they were born and when they died, and a lot of family history is also the history of the entire human race. So it never ceases to be something of great interest. And history has a whole lot more meaning when you view it through the eyes of people you know, who you are blood related to, your direct ancestors. It definitely takes on a new dimension. I look through history with totally different eyes now when I look at different epochs in history, epochs, or however you say that word. Just different periods in history, and I try to view it through the eyes of ancestors I know who lived in the time and location where certain historical events were taking place. So, history and genealogy, to me, are linked. And like I said, I'm totally blown away that I had ancestors involved in the Salem witch trials. It definitely affects my everyday thought, even to this day. Even though I've gotten used to the information since I first learned of it, I still look back and just wonder, boy, wow. How could that be that something I was so interested in as a child turned out to be relevant to me personally? Okay, well, I'll stop now because I'm going to guess you got more than you want to deal with at this point. Let me turn off the recorder and try to send this to you, Kathy.